Hedge Nordic, your single access point to the Nordic hedge fund industry.
In this interview, Eugene Guzrin from Hedge Nordic talks with one of the two portfolio managers of St. Petri Long Short, the best performing Nordic hedge fund in 2020 with a return of 98%. Let's find out more about the fund.
How do you usually introduce St. Petri Long Short to new investors?
The short version is that we are a thematic, unconstrained and uncorrelated hedge fund. And what I mean by, or what we mean by thematic is that we invest in change. We invest in disruption. So we will every time we before we engage in with the company, we will try to understand the underlying seismic shifts that are driving and will drive this company over a longer period of time. That's quite important for us. And so we've been thematic thinking is not new to us, because we've been thinking in thematic terms for more than 20 years. So today I would say our knowledge is pretty thorough and profound when it comes to thematic assets. The fund itself is European, European focused long short kind of fundamental equity hedge fund that utilizes this thematic process for stock picking.
And what is the motivation and the benefit behind focusing on structural changes, on disruption and investable themes?
If you look at Europe over the last 20 years, if you look at the European index, not much has changed. Actually, the index is at the same level as it was 20 years ago. So if you invested 100 euros 20 years ago, you still have 100 euros. But if you look beneath that, some very powerful seismic shifts have occurred. So you have some sectors that are still down 80%. And then you have some areas of the market that are up 3, 4, 5, even 6 times. So if you just focus on the index as a whole, you will not be able to capture the disruption. And going forward, it's not to talk about the outlook, because I think we will cover that later. But going forward, given where we are in the long-term debt cycle, and given where we are interest rate wise, and given that we see a lot of disruption coming, I think we could actually face not the same, but a similar scenario where the overall market doesn't do much going forward, but there will still be massive disruption beneath that. So that's the motivation for us to focus on paradigm shifts.
But usually, how many themes are reflected in your portfolio on average, and how many long and short positions do you usually hold across each theme that you have?
In our portfolio, we will typically have between 8 and 10, maybe 12 themes. So that's it. This is so that's the setup. We will have 50, 60 positions. Half of it will be short, half of it will be long. And then in terms of how many names we will have within the theme, depends actually on 2 factors. First of all, the maturity of the theme, because we believe every theme follows a kind of S-curve. It has its own maturity life cycle. So early stage themes, because we don't have much data to analyze upon, we cannot build high conviction. We'll typically have fewer names. And then when they grow and are being recognized by some other players in the market, you have more data to analyze upon. So you have high conviction. So you put both larger positions and more names into it.
But now focusing on last year, St. Petri Long Short returned over 98% last year. What were the key factors that enabled you to achieve this remarkable performance?
Going into going into 2020, Jens and I, we were not that positive. So when you start with a little bit of negative mindset and something negative like COVID occurs, you already in a pole position because you have the mindset and you can actually adjust much faster than first starting to convince each other that this is, actually negative and you have to go the other direction. So point number one, we have been negative, and it has been relatively easy for us to adjust to COVID, tsunami. I would say the second point would be that many of the themes that COVID had an impact on or accelerated, we already had in our portfolio and initiated on years back. So the theme like online retail transitions, so all the online stay at home, work from home themes, we already had that conviction in our portfolio. So it was just a matter of adjusting the weight. On the short side, we were actually already shorted real estate companies, commercial real estate companies. Again, it was just a question of adjusting the right knobs. The third thing I would say is about our size. I think it's quite important to maintain agility and being nimble. So it means that you cannot be too big. Things that Jens and I can implement in our portfolio is probably a question, I wouldn't say hours, but it's more a question of days. A day or days, where when you work in a big organization and you have a lot of assets, it's quite difficult to adjust, to be nimble and agile. The last point regarding 2020 is, I think it's about our mandate, because it is our own money. So the fund is set up in a way that is unconstrained.
Hedge Nordic, your single access point to the Nordic hedge fund industry.